What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Why and Gold Talk podcast. And I know a lot of you were asking for more Ashley content. That is not going to come today. We got the boys back with us. It's Chris, Fedor, Jimmy Watkins joining me today on today's podcast. And we got a lot of different topics to get into today. We're going to start with the Cavs are on the verge of going on one of the longest road trips of the season. Obviously, they head to Memphis and they come home to play the Orlando Magic, and then they head out west for an extremely long road trip. And I talked to the guys before the podcast, and there were a couple stories that piqued my interest when it comes to different stores that they go to, not only on travel trips, but also understanding that Chris is, let's say, known for forgetting something, one or two things when it comes to a long road trip, whether it be a belt, a toothbrush, some floss, whatever you want to talk about.
Underwear.
But
Yep, forgot underwear one time.
there
Don't know
you
how
go.
you forget to pack that. It's one of the most essential items that you would pack.
I've done it.
But so, Chris, what is your favorite store to go to, and why is it a place that we have talked about on this podcast at length when it comes to your road trips, especially for some reason when you go out west?
Well, first of all, my favorite store to go to is whichever one is nearby my hotel. So I am not loyal to Target. I am not loyal to Marshalls. I am not loyal to Walgreens, CVS. If it's near my hotel, it's walking distance, and it's open, I am there. There's a 7-Eleven nearby one of the hotels where I stay in Boston, and it is the most sketchy place that you can walk into, where it's like boarded up windows and stuff like that, but it's open and it's near a hotel where I stay. So I've been in there multiple times. The Western Outlet in Oklahoma City, I've bought a authentic leather belt from there. That's the hilarious one, because the worst place for you to forget your belt is Oklahoma City, because there's just not a lot there. And where you would want to go to get a belt is these fancy Western wear outlet stores where they're selling these authentic cowboy hats, these genuine leather belts, these big honking belt buckles with eagles and flags and all these different things on them. So when I was in Oklahoma City a couple of years ago, I just strolled into the Western wear outlet store because, one, I was looking for a cowboy hat. I was honestly going to wear a cowboy hat on the remainder of the trip. I was going to wear it to the game just because I wanted to fit in Oklahoma City style, but I had realized that I forgot my belt. So I go in there and they have, oh my God, 8 racks of belts. There's a whole rack of black. There's a whole rack of brown.
Oh,
There's
I remember this story
brown
from when it happened.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I go in there and the guy sees me looking at all these belts, and my eyes are so big because I couldn't believe the price that they were asking for a belt. This isn't a Target belt that you can just pick up for $19.99 or something like that. No, this is genuine leather, baby. So I'm looking at the price tag, and the cheapest one I see is $50. And I'm like, excuse me, sir. Mind you, he's decked out in a cowboy hat and a flannel shirt. He is the most cowboy looking dude that you would expect. And right across the street is a sarsaparilla. So, I'm in the thick of it. I'm in the stockyards of Oklahoma City, basically. And I say, excuse me, partner, are there any cheaper belts that you have than just these? And he said, no, these are the cheapest ones that we have. In fact, there's belt buckles over there if you want to get one of those too. And I said, I'm the most non-belt buckle guy that there is in this world. So you're not going to sell me. You're not going to upcharge me on a belt buckle. I'm just going to take my belt. I'm going to hang my head and I'm going to leave. And Holly has the credit card notifications set up on her phone through her app. So she gets the notification from Capital One, and it's Western Wear Outlet. And I think with tax or whatever, it turned out to be close to $60. And I just get a text immediately. What did you buy for $60 at the Western Wear Outlet store? Tell me you did not buy cowboy boots. And I responded. I said, no, I did not buy cowboy boots. Tell me you did not buy a cowboy hat. Said, no, I did not buy a cowboy hat. So we finally got to it with the belt. So long story short, I will go in any store. It doesn't matter. I am not loyal to one. I will go into any store if I'm on the road and if I'm that desperate in need of something.
Jimmy?
I mean, I've a lot of ways I can go here. I've slept in a car one night on a work road trip because I was writing overnight. That's not even worth going into. I've slept in a car overnight. And
no, sorry.
The one I was going to tell.
Yes, no.
It's really not. Okay,
no.
fine.
Yes, it
fine.
is.
It's
Yes,
really,
it is. Yes, it is.
It was. I was working for the Omaha World Herald, covering Nebraska football and basketball, and Adrian Martinez had transferred from Nebraska to Kansas State, and they sent me, instead of covering Nebraska versus nobody university, they sent me to cover Kansas State, Adrian Martinez's first start, because he was like a cult hero in Nebraska, even though he never led them to a winning season.
Okay.
So I go there, I'm talking to him, I'm talking to his dad. It's a good story. He started some Guitar Hero rock band with two other Nebraska transfers called the Nebraska Rejects. Getting good stuff. It's a late night writing because it's like it's one of those non-con games that just is at 7:00. No reason for it to be at 7:00, but it's one of those non-con. We're giving this FBS school a bunch of money games, so I don't get to talk to him until after the game. I can flag his dad down, all that stuff. I'm up really late writing, and it's just to the point where, like, am I really getting a hotel for 2 hours, 3 hours right now?
Yes.
So
yes,
you
are.
Well, that's not what I did. I just went into the back seat of the car, took a little nap, woke up the next morning, climbed into the front seat, drove back. But the story I was gonna tell is that also on the Nebraska beat, going to a Minnesota, Nebraska. This was peak Big Ten West football. A lot of punts out there, and we had these things we had fleet cars for the company. So like you drive to the office, you leave your car there, and then you get a company car so that you don't have to put miles on your car. Very nice. Unfortunately, the two college shirts that I had planned to bring were hanging in my car the entire weekend. So I wore a frickin' Ohio University quarter zip for like 3 straight days. Go Bobcats. MAC tournament starts this week. But I wore an Ohio University quarter zip for like 3 straight days, including to the game, which is like for the people, it's just bad journalism form, particularly in the college game, because like, that's theoretically competition for these Big Ten schools. So my old boss still makes fun of me and asks me if I'm scouting for the Cats every now and again.
Rightfully so.
Okay,
but wait a minute. Hold on. I have a question. When you were on that work trip, that was covered by work, right? Like they sent you, they took care of everything. Sure. So how does it not come in your mind of they're sending me, they're asking me to be here, I'm just going to get a hotel on their dime? How do you come up with the idea
there's two things happening there.
I'm going to save them money and I'm going to sleep in my car? Like, what?
There's two things happening there. One, there's some naivete where it's like, okay, if I save them whatever, $180 here, they'll get me back down the road. I was very young. Obviously very stupid.
Yes.
So wrong. They never even thought twice about it. Never, ever. Like, I got nothing extra on the back end out of it. Of course. The other thing is, it's like, I was so dead tired. It's like, dude, I could sleep in the back of this car right now.
No.
So that's what I did.
Okay.
Absolutely ridiculous.
100% ridiculous. Like when I was in Monroe, Louisiana, covering Grambling State, Louisiana Tech, and high school sports for USA Today and the Gannett Network, like they were like, I was like, okay, so they're better go to the regionals for the first time in however many years, are you sending me to this? And they were like,
Uh,
no. And I was like, well, I guess I'm reporting on it from my couch because I'm not finna drive to
that's right.
Arkansas for y'all to
That's
not
right.
do like especially on like entry level paychecks, Jimmy. Like I know you know this. Like we wasn't making enough to be like, if they're not sending us, we're not going. So like when I got to cleveland.com, like so many jobs later, and they were like, hey, we're gonna send you on a trip. I was like, wait, I actually get to go and do the reporting that you want me to do. I don't have to sit up late at night and call 16 different people to try and figure out what the quotes were from this because nobody wants to actually post the post game stuff. Great. No, anyway, this is very off topic from what I had thought we were going to talk about today.
That's how
Even if
podcasts
it
go.
even if it was gonna be more evergreen than we usually do. But the main thing I was gonna ask is because there were two stories that were told before this podcast about two very different like pharmacy slash
Oh yeah,
We were talking about CVS. That like I feel like we gave you the better stuff.
yeah.
yeah,
I
I
feel
no,
like
mean,
we
we're
gave
talking
you the
100%.
about
better stuff.
CVS because CVS is my son Elliot's favorite store in the world.
There
He
we go.
always asks daddy and mommy to take him to CVS. Number one, because CVS has batteries for his toys there, and he knows that's where we get the batteries for his toys. They've got wide enough aisles that he can go run around and be fine. Like the counter where you go for the pharmacy and to check out isn't super high, and he's tall to begin with for a 3 year old. He's more than half of me already at this point in time. It's outrageous. But the counters themselves are not too tall, so he can see over them, and he just likes to talk to people. He just likes to interact with people. So he'll just go up to the counter and say, "Hi, how you doing? How's your day going?" All of that kind of stuff. And the other thing is, like, he has gotten it in his mind. I don't know how this happened. Maybe it's my fault. I'm sure my wife does blame me. She grumbles about this constantly when I'm not around, I'm sure. So he has gotten it in his mind that if we go to CVS, that means he's allowed to come home with a toy. So he knows that there is a toy aisle specifically in this one CVS where we go. They have superhero masks. They have a bunch of different toy cars. They have, bubble guns and stuff like that. You name it. They have it. So he has gotten it in his head that anytime daddy goes to CVS, I want to go too because he thinks he's going to get a toy. And he walks right down the toy aisle. He says, "Daddy, I get one?" Like, I didn't tell you you were getting one. What are you talking about? Like, where did this come from? But he has gotten it in his mind that every time we go to CVS, or Walgreens for that matter, that he is allowed to pick out one toy or one quote unquote treat. And the other day, I thought I was going to get out of CVS with a sucker because, like, he picked out a sucker. He grabbed it. He was like, "Daddy, I want this." And I said, "Okay, whatever. It's 99 cents or something like that. It's a sucker. It'll keep you busy for a while." He puts it down. He negotiates with me and he says, "I put back, I get this." And I was like, "Well, what?" And it's like this $10 toy of like a dinosaur mouth where these bubbles just come shooting out of it and it makes this roaring sound. So I've got a 3 year old negotiating with me, putting a sucker back and getting a toy. And that's my life basically.
That story went from okay, he's pretty tall. Let's teach him some post footwork to send him to Rich Paul camp
No,
in
right?
a real hurry.
Clutch Sports. He'll get you paid.
Man. And Jimmy, to your point from earlier, I think you guys did give me the better stuff, and it kind of segues into like the reporter aspect of the conversation that we did want to have, which is we are all at a privilege of being able to do the jobs that we get to do, right?
Yeah.
Like this is a privilege, getting to cover basketball, football, whatever sport you want to talk about for a living. This is a privilege. I know we all go ahead, Jimmy.
I was just gonna say, not a real job. Not a real job.
Correct.
First of all, yes, it is a real job. The hours of it are obnoxious. It's late nights. It's early mornings. It is a lot of travel. It is very, very difficult. I don't want to hear this whole thing about not a real job. It is a real job.
Okay. Is this Elliot that we have on the pod, or is this Chris? I'm confused.
I hate when all these people say, "Oh, I haven't worked a day in my ass." Like, I'm working 16-hour days.
That's fair. That's fair. We work really hard, but like, so do the people on dirty jobs. Like, that's a real job right there. Okay, like that. We chose this life. We chose this life, and it I thought we all acknowledged it was a privilege. What happened? We went from it's a privilege.
Right, so let's get back to
picketing outside the cleveland.com offices.
No. Because you took it a step further, saying it's not a real job. Okay. My God,
that's fair.
So let's get back to this. We turned a hobby and a passion into a job, so it doesn't feel like we're working all the time. But when we're up at 2-3 in the morning recording a podcast, we all can say, as Jimmy said on the podcast last night, we're tired, and sometimes our brains don't function the same amount of way because we've been up since shoot-arounds at 10 a.m. We have to be up reporting news, apparently, especially in the buyout market, trade market news, all of those different things till about 2:30. Potentially take an hour nap, then get back up at 4 o'clock or 3:30, 4 o'clock to get ready to be at the arena by 5:15 if it's a 7 o'clock game, and then do not get done working until 4 in the morning. So that's a breakdown, small little breakdown of one day for a beat reporter when it comes to us. And this is me, Chris, and Jimmy when it comes to this. But again, this is a privilege. And this is where I want to go with this because I feel like we keep getting pulled in different directions. And I love it. But there was a big major media hit that happened, I think it was a couple weeks ago now, maybe last week, when LeBron James confronted Stephen A. Smith, who has been doing the job as a journalist since the 1990s, right? And I want to reiterate, it is a privilege to be able to have the access, the communication pools that we have with these players. But Chris, as somebody who has been doing this for over 10 years, I wanted to get your dissection of the process and being able to communicate and where things went wrong, not who was in the wrong, but like how you might have handled it differently. Because for me, it's a lot of stuff that could have been handled behind the scenes and two very major faces that took to the internet to handle things that one could have been about somebody else or two been about something that could have happened behind the scenes in a conversation or like we like to say, could have been an email.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's interesting because like there is part of this job where it's your responsibility to be critical and be honest, and you have to be authentically yourself, right? And sometimes that means that you're going to say things, you're going to write things, you're going to believe things that bother people, that other people don't see the same kind of way. But I have a rule. It's not the only rule, but I have a major rule, and it's do not take it to a personal level. Like, yeah, there are some times where sports will intersect with life, and what somebody has going on in their life needs to be reported, and that story needs to be told because it provides perspective, it provides context. But when it comes to criticism, and it comes to talking about a guy that, whether it's LeBron, whether it's Darius Garland, whether it's Donovan Mitchell, whether it's Luka Doncic, don't take it to a personal level. Be professional about it. And that's one of the things that stands out to me about the whole Stephen A. Smith, LeBron James thing is that, you know, when Stephen A. was talking about Bronny, like he was pleading to LeBron from a father perspective. And if you want to talk about Bronny as the basketball player, cool, like fine, right? I still think that's over the top because he was a late second round pick. You know what I mean? He's basically a nobody in the grand scheme of things right now for the Los Angeles Lakers. So it's not determining whether they're going to be successful or whether they're going to be failing. There are like other draft picks that have been drafted higher than Bronny that have not had good seasons, that don't get the same kind of attention and don't get the same kind of criticism. And I get it. His last name is James. He plays for the Lakers. He is a more hot button issue. He does move the needle in a different kind of way. But when was the last time a late second round pick got this level of criticism? It just doesn't happen. It doesn't. But the problem with the whole thing beyond that is that it felt like Stephen A took it to a personal level and was talking about LeBron James, the father, as opposed to LeBron James, the basketball player, LeBron James, the Los Angeles Laker. And that, to me, for the rule that I have in this, is crossing the line. And you don't want to take it that way. And if you're going to cross the line that kind of way, there are going to be consequences. And players are going to be pissed about it. And I totally understand where LeBron is coming from. He probably could have handled it better and not gone up to Stephen A. like at the start of whatever quarter it was in public like that. Stephen A. certainly could have handled it better himself. But this is all to say that the business that we're in can be difficult when it comes to relationships with players, because a large segment of what we do, not the largest, but a large segment of what we do, is being critical of these guys. And that's hard. It's hard for guys sometimes to hear that, to read that, to think that you're against them. And it's why relationships are so delicate when it comes to this particular business.
Okay, so the long and short of it for me, but before we get into the journalistic part of this, because that's a little complicated. Stephen A. has not been a traditional journalist for a long time. He certainly has background as a beat reporter, and he was good at it. He was also a columnist, and he used that as a springboard into the TV career. But like, I do wonder when the last time Stephen A. was actually in a locker room to work the locker room. That's an open question. I don't know the answer, but I think it's probably been a while. He's still sourced up. He still knows a lot of people. He still has connections.
He gets credentialed. He gets credentialed to cover the NBA Finals. He gets credentialed to be at big time events.
I guess on a consistent basis, and because he's reached such a status, he doesn't have to be there as much on a consistent basis anymore. But like, part of this, the journalistic part of this, is that he doesn't really have a relationship with LeBron. I think this has been kind of simmering for a while. They haven't seen eye to eye for some time. It sounds like Chris would know that better than me, but we'll get into that. The long and short of it is, I think everyone's a little wrong here. I think LeBron can't say this spotlight that you're putting on my 56th pick son is unfair when you were on the internet saying when he was in college, this guy's better than half the guys in the league right now. That's not, you can't have it both ways. All right. You've shined. You can't shine the spotlight on the sun and then say, whoa, the spotlight is too bright on my son. This is unfair. That's can't have that. Stephen A. I've been laughing all week at this idea that, okay, you've made me talk about it. Now that it's a viral sensation, now that my bosses are texting me, like, the second LeBron came up to you and checked you, you knew that was leading first take the next day. And I do think there is an element. While again, I just said, I think LeBron has contributed to the brightness of the spotlight on his son. Stephen A. knows that the LeBron well is ripe for ratings. Of course, this goes beyond. He's not just Stephen A. is not just a character on First Take. He's one of the producers on First Take. He has the most power in the room as it pertains to that show. Not to mention he does his own podcasts. I think he just went on Gilbert Arenas' podcast. He's turned this into a media tour. He's kind of he's kind of perverted the whole thing by like using this as a run for him, as a runway for him. So that part, if I was doing Blame Pie, I think what LeBron did, gassing up his son, a little bit more normal and understandable than Stephen A. sort of picking out a famous player's son as, I don't know, SEO bait or YouTube click bait, that sort of thing. I think Stephen A is a little bit more in the wrong than LeBron. But as it pertains to the journalistic side of this, it's not uncommon for you to write something that someone doesn't like and them to come up to you at a game or before a game or after a game and check you about it. I think it's kind of a badge of honor for you to show up on the days where you do those things, if you are able to, just so if someone does want to read you the riot act, you're there. This is where Stephen A's place in the media ecosystem makes it a little bit more complicated. I think part of the reason LeBron stopped what he was doing in the middle of a game to do this is because he doesn't see Stephen A very often out and about. True. And so he saw the guy he had a problem with. He went up to him and he said, I have a problem with you.
Right. In most cases, these confrontations, if you want to label them confrontations, they come in the locker room after games. And that's another rule that I have, is that, if you're going to be critical, if you're going to say things that could be controversial, if you're going to write things that could be controversial, show up. You got to be there at shoot around. You got to be there at practice. You got to be there before the game in the locker room, after the game in the locker room. And that's one of the things that can make today's era a little bit more complicated, because Jimmy's right. These podcasters, some podcasters aren't in the locker rooms. They're not at practices. They're not at shoot-arounds, right? They're just behind a microphone, and players look at it as, okay, you're hiding behind a microphone, right? Same thing when it comes to radio hosts and stuff like that. So one of the things that I was taught like a long time ago is be present and show your face. So that if you want to have a man-to-man conversation with whoever it is, you can do that. And you can do that in the locker room, or you can do that in the hallway leading to the locker room, or whatever the case may be. You're not going to do that on the court when a guy is trying to warm up before a game. That's not the right environment for that. So I do think there's some truth to that, Jimmy, is like LeBron saw an opportunity. He was like, wait a minute, Stephen A's here. He's not going to be in the locker room after the game. He's not going to be at practice tomorrow. He's not going to be at shoot around the next day. This is my opportunity, so let me go confront him. The other thing that I would say is that, to your point, Jimmy, if you haven't had one of these confrontations, I don't want to say that you're doing the job wrong, but you might be doing a slight disservice to your readership, because you're not looking at the game or a player with the kind of critical eye that you probably have to in order to be that level of objective. Look, it's the Cavs right now. They're the best team in the NBA. It's a different kind of situation. There aren't too many things to be critical about, right? But in the past, when they're going through a rebuild and they're the worst team in the NBA, and, players are privately talking about Colin Sexton not being able to play the game of basketball, and he should be in the G League or something along those lines. Like, if you're writing about Colin Sexton is great and Colin Sexton's a future all-star and stuff like that, are you really like being as honest and forthcoming based on like all of the information that you're gaining because of the access that you have to the team? Right? You have to find the common ground between what you believe to be true, what you're seeing with your eyes, what you're hearing from players, what you're hearing from other sources around the NBA, and you put it all together and you try and make it as coherent and as digestible for the reader as you possibly can.
Well, the old saying is, sorry, Ethan, real quick. The old saying is, journalism is what they don't want you to write. The rest of it's PR.
So a couple things just to kind of rehash some topics. When Jimmy was talking about Stephen A. And the lack of being available, which I agree with. I think because I watched some of the clips of the discussions of multiple different places that Stephen A. went on to discuss the topic, and we'll get into that portion of it. He mentioned that the last time he was a beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer was 2010. So, like, I'm
Yep.
not saying that that's the last time that he was a beat reporter, but like, if we have to look back 15 years to like, and he was talking about looking back at a different confrontation he had with a different player where he had to talk with him about something that he had said. Like, if that's the last time you had to go through the archives when you were at the Philadelphia Inquirer from the 1990s to 2010, like, your credibility when it comes to like being in locker rooms is different from being a face on the court. Like, we obviously understand there's a difference from being a TV personality that comes to the games to watch the game and analyze the game than going behind the scenes and being in the locker room and actually talking to this guy and being face to face. There's a vast difference between those two things. And the other thing that I noticed, or I believe is true from watching these clips, is Stephen A. was told by somebody that LeBron wanted to talk to him. So he took a flight to LA to particularly be at that game. That's what I had been seeing
I heard
on.
different. I heard
Okay,
different. He was there. He was there as a guest of somebody.
that
His
okay.
agency,
And
a guest of his
yes,
agency.
a guest of his
Yeah.
agency, somebody who had a courtside seat, and he wanted to be there. One, in support of that guy, and two, because it was an opportunity to sit courtside with his buddy.
The other portion of this is when we're talking about reporters like needing to have this like conversation with players and all these different things. I think there's like levels to it, as there is to almost everything. Like, for this, it feels like because these are two of the biggest heads of like both the journalism industry, if that's what you want to call what Stephen A. does, and LeBron James in the NBA, like, that is going to get the most play, particularly because, as Jimmy mentioned, Stephen A. Smith went on 4 different podcasts to give his side of the story when LeBron was like, I really don't want to touch on this. And the extreme, I feel like, to this, and me and Jimmy talked about this briefly, is the Joel Embiid aspect of it, which also happened earlier this season, where a player put hands on a reporter.
Right.
It doesn't matter what significance you want to say hands were put on that said reporter. Hands were put on the reporter, and that's a confrontation based on something that was said that was personal, and as Chris said, probably went over the line. Not probably, it did go over the line when it comes to the reporting and the storytelling and all these different things. My thing as a journalist, I got into this to tell the stories of the players and to be the voice that they don't have in the media, right? Because before the age of podcasting, players didn't have the opportunity as much to like voice their opinions or tell their sides of stories. So we were the kind of the line between the fans and the players for them to actually understand why something happened, who they are as people, and get into the nuances of that. I wanted to ask you guys, what do you guys think of the podcast element now? Obviously, we know Podcast P, Paul George, had to slow down his podcast role to focus on his job with the Los Angeles.
Yeah, his job. What a concept. You think, Paul? You think you should try to win more games? How about this? No one gets a podcast episode until their team's 500. How about that? How about that?
What do you guys
Score
think
30
about
points
the concept?
one time?
Man, don't score under 10 points. Anyway, what do you guys think of the concept of players now being able to get to have their, like, not their own voices, but their own platforms to voice their opinions on situations? And I think it's a good thing for them. I think it's obviously going to chew into some of what we do in the importance of how we get information.
Well, look, I mean, I think in the day and age that we are in right now, I think it's the reality of this business, and it's just something else that we as reporters are going to have to navigate. There are things that are going to be said on these podcasts that aren't going to be said in front of cameras, in a post-game scrum, in a one-on-one environment, because that's where they want to keep it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other stories out there for you to chase as a reporter. It doesn't mean that there aren't other angles that you can pursue with that particular person. And the other thing that I'll say is I have no problem with it, provided that it doesn't conflict with, anything else that they're doing, and provided that it's not a distraction, provided that it doesn't take away from the success of the basketball team or the primary job that these guys have. You know what I mean? Some of these guys are going to put things on pause, and they're going to wait till the off season. I mean, Tristan Thompson will probably do TV stuff in the off season for whatever network it is. But the only thing that he's doing is these quick little post-game things for FanDuel Sports. And it's not taking away from anything. It's not shining a bad light on the team. It's not a distraction in any sort of way. So provided that it doesn't get in the way of the main thing, I have no issue with it, because they should have a platform. Because these are people at the end of the day. Like, yes, they're athletes. Yes, they're entertainers. Yes, they make a whole ton of money. But they're people, and they have things to say. They have stories to share, and they should be given these kinds of platforms. And if it's just more comfortable for them to do it on a podcast or do it on a video cast or something like that, then so be it. And it's just something that we have to learn how to navigate in today's day and age. Just like we had to learn, the collective we had to learn how to cover basketball in the age of Twitter. Right? Just like we had to learn how to cover basketball in the age of player empowerment. And like, everything is going to change, and you just adapt. Like, there's an old phrase that one of my professors at Baldwin Wallace used, and he wasn't trying to be over the top, but it was true. Like, life changes so fast, the business itself changes so fast. Evolve or perish. At the end of the day, evolve or perish.
I would say, first of all, I'm tickled by the idea of, I don't know, 12th man Tristan Thompson saying, "Oh boy, I really should temper my media opportunities while the season is happening." Meanwhile, $240 million man Paul George or thereabouts is like, "Nah, I can keep getting these episodes off." Oh, what's that? Joel's out another 2 weeks? We'll be fine. Load up the clip. Let's have another round table discussion. Have another round table discussion. What I think about player podcasts is what I think about most podcasts, which is more power to you. But man, we got a lot of them already. So please be sure you have something to say. It's a cool way to, before we've all worked had a podcast in the official capacity, at least like as I was coming up to the media space, I started a couple with my friends. It's a fun thing to do, to get your ideas out there and spend some time, spend some scheduled time in with people you're interested in talking to. That's cool. But that doesn't mean that everybody, this goes for podcasts at large and player podcasts, not everybody who has one needs one. And they're not all going to be like, there are like Jeff Teague, born to do that. Jeff Teague, incredible storyteller.
Really good storyteller.
And I could watch his podcast clips for days. I actually think Paul George is pretty good at it. He better be. He's getting a lot of reps. But I think he's pretty good at it. I think Draymond Green is pretty good at it. I think that, I don't know that I would love it if that was my teammate and he was like the rest of us are going to sleep or going out or whatever. And, I got to go record the pod. That's kind of strange to me. But
Josh Hart, very good at podcasting, by the way.
Josh Hart, yes. Roommates pod. Good.
Yes,
good.
Very good.
As it pertains to us, though, I do find that a good chunk of the athlete, I think this will evolve, but we're in the early phases of quote unquote new media, which is really just athletes doing old media. Whatever. I do find that these guys sometimes struggle to find what's interesting about themselves. Like they think that I'm thinking, okay, Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant has this boardroom thing on ESPN where it's about his business ventures and other athletes' business ventures, and it's like it's kind of just rich people talking to rich people, and it's like, Kevin,
Is
we
it
like
really
you because
relatable?
you're a great basketball player, and actually you are I find Kevin to be one of the most insightful interviews across the league. I find you're really smart when you're talking about this thing and people around it. I think Kevin also has very interesting opinions on the media ecosystem in which we live because of all the experience he has going through it. Like this is not like a only talk about basketball kind of thing. It's just like from a consumer's standpoint, I really don't care what Steph or Kevin or name your favorite basketball player is doing in the investment space. Maybe I should. Maybe that's why my bank account looks like what it is and theirs looks like that, but I just don't. I care about them. I care about what they have to say about other things. So I think that because we are professionally trained in this space, we will, at least for the foreseeable future, have a leg up on the athlete media space for some time. But I'm not so arrogant to think that this what we do cannot be replicated by the people we cover. That's not the case. I do think right now we have the leg up though.
So I want to just play this clip that from the Stephen A. Smith interview. I forget. It looks like the Underdog Productions of what was said when he found out like he was heading to LA. Because this is where I found out what I said earlier. Just to clarify,
You had called me and said, Bron pissed off. Motherfucker mad as hell. He want to see you man to man. I said, what would I have done? Rich Paul said, you'd have hung up the phone and you'd flew to LA. I said, thank you. So my point is, rather than come up to me at Courtside, all you had to do was say, yo, I need you to stay. Don't leave this game. I need you to see you after the game. That's all he had to say to me.
so obviously this is like multiple different avenues of getting.
We're dealing in hypotheticals, but so I get what he's saying there.
Right. And I'm saying, like, it feels like there was multiple reasons for Stephen A. Smith to be in LA that night, right? The other thing about it is he goes into kind of what Chris was talking about. Like, these are conversations that, again, should happen in the locker room, man to man, not necessarily in front of the entire world. And whatever, like, you want to say, I just think these are like conversations that can be held in private. But my favorite part about this, and it kind of goes again into what Chris was talking about, how we had to learn how to operate with Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and reporting on all these different platforms, and the race to try and be the first to get stuff out, but still being factually accurate and all these other things. Is also
and realize that we don't get paid by Twitter. We get paid by our company. So not
Correct.
everything that we write, not everything that we think, not everything that we believe is going to go to Twitter. It's certainly not going to go there first because they're not paying us to put it on there first.
Sign up for subtext.
Sign up for
$3.99
subtext.
a
There you
month.
go. There you go, Jimmy. $3.99 a month, 14-day free trial. But my favorite part about this is that all the players are learning it too, right? Kevin Love, after Stephen A. Smith took to Twitter to say, I didn't want to have to address this. I wouldn't have either had it not gone viral, talking about the clip between him and LeBron James. Now I have no choice. First take, first at 10 a.m., then the Stephen A. Smith show on YouTube. And of course, we know that continued on. But Kevin Love, who has been on a social media tear, if I might add, as of late, just on Instagram and Twitter, or X, formerly Twitter. He quote tweeted what Stephen A. Smith said on March 7th, saying, "You have no choice, ? LOL. Because it went viral, ? LOL. You didn't want to have to, ? LOL. You wouldn't have, ? LOL. Like, and Kevin Love, we know how much he is in the mental health space and being able to be one of the first NBA players to kind of break ground on the subject and talk about what he's gone through in the league and all these other things. But also having a comedic humor to this, but also knowing that he is a serious person. Like he posted the other day about Hooters going out of business and there are two players being two players that could save it, and it was Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Hooters shirts on Instagram. Like that's phenomenal. That's hilarious. That, as they say, like the best thing about comedy is timing. So having that aspect of it, and Kevin Love has been on top of it. But I just think there's so many different avenues. There's so many different lanes now of what we have to deal with as journalists, but also it allows us to get more into their lives. Like there's journalists that aren't reporters that are like, oh my God, Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs put popcorn in Jalen Tyson's car. Let's report on this like it's the biggest thing since whatever. Let's get engagement and clips and all these other things. And me and Chris are over here like, that's cool.
I also think it's really, really important to back up the things that you say and the things that you believe. Because it's one thing to just be flippant and throw something out there, whatever hot take it is or something like that. But back it up, be able to stand on it, provide and reasoning for it, provide an explanation for it. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I still get crap from people inside the Cavs organization about not making Donovan Mitchell first team All NBA a couple of years ago. I do. I still get grief from Donovan, from people in the front office, from other members of the organization. They told me that my thinking and my reasoning was incredibly flawed. So it just comes with the territory. Like you're not always going to write things that people like. You're not always going to have an opinion that people like or agree with, but you have to be true to yourself, your own beliefs, the things that you see. You have to write those things and you have to be able to back them up and you have to be able to stand on those things. And I felt like I gave a real good explanation, and I backed up what I believed a couple of years ago about the first team All NBA thing. But I'm telling you right now, like, I've had people inside the organization already ask me, like, hey, who are you voting for Sixth Man of the Year? Who are you voting for MVP? Like, who are you voting for Most Improved Player? I've gotten that from coaches. I've gotten that from players inside the organization. And like, you can't allow it to sway what you believe to be true. Like, you listen. Okay. All right. You think it should be Ty Jerome for Sixth Man of the Year. Lay out the case. I'm all ears. I want to hear what it is that you think about that. But it doesn't mean that just because I cover the Cavs, that every Cavs player is going to get my vote for one reason or another. Look, this year, there's going to be Cavs all over the place. You know what I mean? So it's going to be a lot easier to justify those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, like, you can't allow that. You can't allow that relationship that you've built or the fear of ruining a relationship or something along those lines take away from what you believe is right or sway you away from what you believe is right and true.
I think that's well said. I just want to put one more thought that's tumbling around my head about the Stephen A. thing, and that is from both sides of the player media sphere here. I mean, fans too. I do think we have an issue where because we have a false equivocation between visibility and I know you. Right? Like, I think a lot of players look at Stephen A. Smith blaring on the TV all the time and they go, oh, that's what the media is.
Yeah.
Or, your NBA Sentinel type accounts or your aggregation type accounts, the worst, the people who are taking what a reporter actually did,
yes,
that was probably paraphrased in some other blog and
yes,
then turning it into, congratulations on accumulating a Twitter following that way, I guess.
Yep.
That in and of itself is something of a grind, but like, what are you actually
Yep.
producing for society? I don't know. That is very visible, and it gets mixed up in what we do.
Yes.
The other side of it is we've been talking about, like, okay, the players have different platforms now. They're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, letting us know a little peek into their lives or what they're thinking that day, or Podcast P is telling you about an old war story, something like that. And I think we falsely equivocate that with, oh, I know this guy. No. You know what they want you to see, first of all, what they're
Right.
projecting as, and even then, you only know a sliver of it. So I think a lot of these, and this is less, LeBron and Stephen A thing is its own animal, but many of these, I think we have preconceived perceptions. Players have preconceived perceptions of us. I think fans have preconceived perceptions of players. Media members have preconceived perceptions of players.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all because we think we know each other when we really don't.
It's funny that you bring up the whole thing about aggregation, because I ran into this multiple times last year with Cavs players, and I ran into the same thing a number of years ago with Cavs players. And, in both instances, those players reached out to Cavs PR and said, I want to talk to Chris. I want to talk to Chris about what it was that he wrote. And they pulled me aside, and I had to respond to him. I said, I didn't write that. Like, that's not me. Like, that's an aggregation from another entity, or that's like one small thing that was written within my piece that whoever brought it out to Twitter or brought it out to Instagram just took that sampling and didn't quote it, but just gave like a general gist of it. So I've had multiple conversations with these players. I say, hey, look, like, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be accountable. There are going to be things that I write that you don't like, but here's the only thing that I'm asking of you. Read the story. And if you have a problem with whatever is written below my byline, that is what I'm responsible for. Whatever's below my byline, that's what I'm responsible for. It's not what I even put on Twitter at times, because that's just like a tease to try and get people to read a story. So read the story below my byline, and then if you still have a problem with it, we'll have a conversation. So that was a conversation that I had with at least one player last year. He went back, he read the story, he met up with me in the locker room for the following road game, and he said, that's not at all what was brought to my attention. My friends were texting me. My friends were screenshotting things. My friends were showing me like all of these different viral things from whatever entity it was. He's like, that's not at all what you wrote. I said, I know. That's what I've been trying to tell you. So if you want to hold me accountable, cool. Like, I'm here. I'm going to be here. We're going to talk these things through. But at least read the story and give me a chance. So ever since then, that player has been fully aware of it's not about those clips or those quotes or those blurbs that these other aggregation sites use or something like that. And then it was like 5 years ago or something like that, and there was the whole Colin Sexton thing around the Cavs, and it was George Hill at the time. And the only thing that he saw was whatever Bleacher Report inflamed. And they used this picture of George Hill like yelling at Colin Sexton. And George Hill wasn't mentioned in the piece at all that I wrote or another website wrote. But he saw that photo and whatever quote it was from the story attached to that particular photo. And he was like, they're casting me in a bad light. What the heck is going on here? So I had to sit down with him and I had that conversation. And I said, hey, look, like, I don't write for Bleacher Report or I don't write for whoever it was that took my story. Like, I write for cleveland.com, the plain dealer. Here's the piece. Would you like to read it? So, when you present it that kind of way, That's all you can really do. Like, you cannot control aggregation at all.
I know
There's nothing that you can do about it. It exists, and you just have to deal with it.
I'm still a pup in this game, in this Cleveland Cavaliers game, and in the beat reporter world of Cleveland, because it is vastly different from covering in different cities, and that's one of the first things I noticed when it came to like garnering a following in Cleveland is like all of my Braves followers from when I reported on the Atlanta Braves did not follow me to Cleveland. So it's like starting from ground zero again. But like when it comes to the aggregation, I'm like, sometimes they're not following your account, they're not following you or whatever, but they'll listen to the podcast and they'll grab
Mhm.
something that Chris says and like, this is reporting. No, 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 no. This is an opinion of
Yeah.
what he was saying. And like I've seen my name thrown in this at times, and then that's the portion of it where I'm like, oh, I'm starting to like people are starting to actually care about what I'm saying because they're aggregating it and putting it out there and twisting my words to the point where like players are like, okay, well, and my favorite part about this is Kenny Atkinson is so candid about it. He's like, oh yeah, I read y'all stuff. I try
Everything.
not to. I try not
Everything.
to, but I read it. And he like subscribed to one of the beat reporters, Danny Cunningham. He subscribed to his Substack, and,
Yep.
and he like brings it up in press conferences. He's like, something you said in your Substack the other day, like this is what I'll reference for today's post game press conference. Like it's so apparent. George Niang was one of the guys that you would know. He's like either reading it or he's hearing it from somewhere,
Mhm.
and then like trying to like figure out why you're saying something. Why like I feel like, and it's not even necessarily like you're being tricked, but it's like there's different layers to it that one paragraph cannot encapsulate what you're
Right.
trying to say. Like there's statistics, there's all
Mhm.
of these different nuances that we go into. Like I mean, when Chris writes a feature story, when I write a feature story, it's usually minimum 1,000 words, and these
Yeah.
little paragraphs are like
I know, right?
50 to 100 words. And I'm like, dude, you're going off of something that is not even 1/10 of the story.
Yeah.
Like, but I just think it's such an interesting place of where we are in the journalism industry. And I know we've talked about this a couple of times, how like AI and all these different things are trying to take over the industry, but I still do not think there is a replacement for genuine storytelling, especially if we continue to inform these players about what is the reality is of the stories. And obviously, Chris being the guy that's on the ground, boots on the ground, as they say, in these different cities, they know that what is coming from these conversations is directly what only he has, because he's one of maybe two. Serena Winters is the other with Chris at these road games. So even when I think that builds the rapport of cleveland.com. I think that builds the
Yeah.
rapport of what we do. And again, I want to wrap this up by kind of going full circle. What we do is a privilege. The opportunity to travel, the opportunity to cover the best team in the NBA, the opportunity to cover the best record in the NBA, whatever light you want to shine on this team in this season, because every season's different, and Chris knows that better than anybody else. Jimmy also knows that. A couple years ago, they were in the ashes of trying to figure out a rebuild, and now they have risen to what is still trying to figure out how they can compete in the playoffs. But I just think we have this podcast in particular goes into so much about what it means to be a journalist in the industry today, the difficulties of it, the beauties of it, and also the realities of there are rules that even if, and we talk about this a lot, there are unwritten rules as a journalist that we follow, that we get taught at Ohio U, at Baldwin Wallace, at whatever school you want to talk about. Obviously, those two are represented very well on this podcast. But Jimmy, is there anything you want to end with to wrap up today's podcast as we put this into a nice little, and I like saying this now, bow tie?
I would just, the phrase that's been popping around my head the entire time we've been having this conversation is media literacy. I wish people knew how to differentiate differentiate aggregation from original reporting. I wish we had a better system for filtering original reporting. Twitter was once a good place for that. It's less so now. I wish 30 years ago newspapers realized that you should charge people for your product sooner on the internet. But really just, I actually just had an idea. Like, I wonder, so we know that the NBA players do media training, right? Like they get coached up on how to talk to us.
Yeah.
I wonder how much they get coached up on, like, how to identify what is being said about, like, how to, like, what does it mean to be a beat reporter? How do you suss out aggregation? I don't know. That's something that would be interesting to ask Adam Silver one day.
When you get up there, Jimmy, you let us know, man. When you get a conversation one-on-one
By the way,
with
he doesn't
Adam,
think about that at all. We're not that important to him. But I do think, but it's a two-way street. Like, we could avoid a lot of miscommunications with the players if they just understood that, aggregation doesn't really matter no matter how many retweets it gets.
100%. And obviously there's different worlds and different reasons for everybody doing stuff. Some people are just looking for followers. Some people are just looking for retweets and all these other things. I can genuinely say without a shadow of a doubt that me, Chris, and Jimmy all do journalism for the right reasons. And that's why we come to you with this podcast 5 days of the week. And
that's right. The Marriott points. That's what we do it for. Completely kidding, folks. Completely. Hashtag sarcasm.
Hashtag
Although
CVS
the Marriott
points
are great.
The Marriott points, the CVS points, getting toys for free, all of these things is very much on our to-do list. But I want to end this podcast with a little tidbit of Cavs news as the Boston Celtics and OKC Thunder game has wrapped up. The Cleveland Cavaliers lead for first place in the Eastern Conference is now 8.5 games after the Celtics fell, I believe it was 118-112 to the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Cavs' magic number to clinch the number 1 seed is now 9. If Boston went undefeated for the rest of the season, the Cleveland Cavaliers would have to go 8-9 to lose the first seed. We're talking about a team that is going for 67 wins to break a franchise record. All of these things are in play and possible. This is also a Cavs team that is on pace to win 70 games. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your questions for tomorrow's Hey Chris episode. I know you guys look forward to this every week. We do it once a week. And to do so, to send in your questions, to get a shout out on the podcast, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page to subscribe for $3.99 a month. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.